What happened?
Well, it was the Elks launch riots. Yeah, there were several big riots in Hollywood a little bit later, but this was like the first big punk rock versus the LAPD riot. It was in downtown Los Angeles, right adjacent to MacArthur Park. You see?
It was at the Park Plaza Hotel where I got married 20 years later. But it it was this big concert. It was a benefit for the first LA punk club, The Mask, which was was having a hard time with their lease or their whatever. They had moved a few times, and but so it was at this big ballroom downtown, and the bands. I can't remember who was the headliner, but
Oh, I know who actually played.
Wino played. I know the Wipers played
Yeah.
as a Portland Organer. You should.
Yeah.
Oh,
They,
yeah, I
they
saw
were
them.
never listed. They
Definitely.
were never listed on the flyer. It was just a special guest. The Zeros played and the
Amazing.
Go-Go's played. And then right after the Go-Go's played, that's when the shit went down. I think Alley Cats and X were also on the bill and they didn't get to play. But it was basically, it's when LAPD, like, what are they called? Like threw down the gauntlet or whatever and declared war against the LA punk scene. And, it was completely unprovoked, completely 100% unprovoked.
And your dad's sitting in the car, like parked across the street.
Yeah, yeah, in MacArthur Park, like so across the street from the from the Park Plaza Hotel is MacArthur Park, and it's gritty down there now, and it's nothing like it was then. It was quite
Wow.
hairy, and both our parents were sitting in their 1969 Toyota Corona, and like our big panic would have been like up until the moment that the LAPD came crashing through the doors was okay, who's going to go out there and tell mom and dad that we can kind of stay a little bit longer, and because the band, because we were always just pushing
Right.
it, and we'd seen the Go-Go's, we want to stay for the Alley Cats and X, and we had some kind of angle with the Alley Cats because there's actually kind of a relation between the McDonald's and Diane Chai, the bass player, and whatever that's in the book. But we could have gone out there and said, Diane hasn't played yet. We're probably thinking about all these kinds of angles that we were going to use. Meanwhile, my parents were across the street in their car watching a squat team assemble with these shields, these plexiglass shields and batons, and they were just thinking, "What the fuck?" And then all of a sudden, they just—I don't remember how thick the wall was. It's probably like
I
20,
remember.
50 of them or something. Just
Yeah, the
came.
grand staircase. Everyone was on the grand staircase because the ballroom was upstairs. So, like, the cops opened the doors and they kept running up the staircase, beating everyone in their path because it was a very wide staircase. And we just happened to be along the wall and kind of creeped down past them to the front door where our dad just happened to be right there. We just lucked out.
But
Wow.
at the front door, it was a complete bottleneck, and we were watching like really unpleasant scenes. I mean, I still remember watching Jeff out of the middle class yelling at a cop, and then him like hitting him over the head with a baton, the cops and his girlfriend as well. And they were later pictured quite famously in Slash magazine as victims of the
LA Times. Yeah.
I saw it happen, but our dad was just like got up in the middle of the bottleneck, and I just remember, God damn it, Steven, and him just grabbing us kind of thing. And also a fun fact is that it's that staircase is something that gets used a lot in films or had been, and it's most notable or most noticeable in the David Lynch film Wild at Heart in the very opening scene. And there's
Wow.
yeah, so there's a really nasty, violent scene that goes
Yeah.
down on that staircase in Wild at Heart. That's the exact staircase that we were
Oh my
sitting on,
God. Wow.
where the shit went down. Of course, the Wild at Heart scene was like 10, 15 years later. And when I was watching that movie in the theater, I was like, oh, that's where the Elks Lodge Riot was.
Well, it's
And then
amazing
a
that
couple 10 years later, I got married.
and your parents were like, all right, when's the next show? I mean, was there any fallout from them witnessing that?
Oh, total. Like, yeah, you are never going out again. Never. That was the whole thing. And then it was kind of a bonding experience because you know, growing up kind of in the 70s, all the teenagers referred to cops as pigs and all that kind of stuff. And if I ever said anything like that, my dad would get really mad. He wasn't really anti-authority at that point. So it was kind of
I guess he
good.
didn't want us following down his
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. But it
Just-
was kind of cool to have them see what really happened, because they would, I mean, as being typical parents of the day, they would have been on the cop side had they not seen it for themselves.
Yeah. Had we just come home and told them like this wild story, they probably would have went, yeah, what did you guys do to deserve that? You know?
Well,
But
I-
yeah,
okay.
if anything, yeah. So I do remember driving away and my dad yelling we were not going to go to any more shows. But then the coverage was in the LA Times, Jeff just mentioned, and I think that they kind of realized that it was like, you know, these places where they were dropping us off were actually perfectly safe. It was the supposedly protective, authoritative side that they needed to worry about, and you know, or the authorities or whatever. And so, you know, the whole thing was kind of
The cops in those days were really bizarre. They were
Yeah.
strange. I mean, they would, you know, I mean, they would hassle you if you're at, you know, you had a whiskey show or the Starwood, and say things like, "Why don't you comb your hair?" It's like, what?